It was the look she gave me that night, like I had become a ghost in my own home, that made everything unravel. Not a single word passed between us for hours after, but that glance, that fleeting moment of coldness, changed everything. I had always prided myself on being a patient man. Maybe that's why I missed the signs for so long. Everyone tells you to trust your instincts, but how do you trust something when you're too tired to care? When everything feels like it's on the edge of falling apart, but you convince yourself it's fine, just a bump in the road. The evening started innocently enough. She invited a few of her co-workers over for a casual dinner. Nothing extravagant. It was a Wednesday, the kind of day that should have been quiet. But even before they arrived, I had a bad feeling creeping up my spine, something I couldn't shake. It wasn't the guests, I didn't mind them. It was her. She was different. The way she moved around the kitchen, the forced smile she gave me when I asked if she needed help. It was subtle, but something was off. I should have noticed then, but I didn't. I tried to distract myself with the wine bottle, pouring it slowly, hoping it would dull whatever growing discomfort was gnawing at me. I should have known it wasn't about the dinner or the guests. It was about us, and I didn't realize that until it was too late. Dinner was over, and we moved into the living room. The usual chatter filled the space, people talking about work, holidays, mundane life details. But I couldn't focus. I kept catching little glimpses of Meredith and her coworker, Ethan. The way they spoke a little too long to each other. The way her eyes lingered when he smiled at her. I couldn't tell if it was my paranoia or something more, but I couldn't stop watching them. It was around the third glass of wine when Ethan, of all people, dropped a comment that cut through the light conversation like a knife. He was a charming guy, the kind of person you couldn't help but like, but in that moment, I found myself growing irritated with his easy confidence. "You're lucky, man," he said, half smiling at me across the room. "Meredith really keeps you grounded. Not every guy could handle the chaos of being with someone like her." I froze, feeling the room shift. Was this a joke? Was he saying what I thought he was saying? I glanced at Meredith, hoping for some indication that this was just a poorly timed remark. But when I met her gaze, it was like everything went still. Her eyes didn't flinch. They didn't apologize for the awkwardness. Instead, she just nodded and gave a little chuckle, the same kind of laugh that felt more like an empty gesture than anything genuine. And then she said it, almost like it was an afterthought, a careless remark. "Yeah, well, I'm not sure I've ever really had someone I could depend on. But I'm glad you think that, Ethan." The words felt like a slap. The air in the room thickened. It wasn't the first time she'd made a comment like that, but something in her tone, something in the way she said it, hit me like a truck. I could feel the heat rising to my face, my stomach turning. But I said nothing. I couldn't find the words. Ethan didn't notice. He was too busy sipping his drink, grinning like he hadn't just crossed a line. But I noticed. I saw everything. The way she avoided looking at me, the way she softened when she spoke to him, and the sharp edge in her voice when she turned back to me. I could feel it, the silent divide that had been growing between us, widening with every word she exchanged with him. The little cracks that had formed in our relationship over the past few months, nothing too obvious, just little things here and there. She was always busy, always distracted. And I had become invisible. I excused myself from the conversation, needing to step outside for a moment. I could feel the weight of the evening pressing down on me, but I didn't know what to do with it. I stood outside in the cold for a while, trying to make sense of it all, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about one comment. This was about everything we hadn't said to each other for so long. When I came back inside, I found Meredith sitting alone in the living room, her eyes glued to her phone. I stood there for a moment, watching her, trying to gather the courage to ask what I needed to know. But before I could speak, she glanced up at me, her face pale, as if she had already prepared herself for this moment. Without a word, she put the phone down and got up to leave. It was all too familiar. The way she avoided confrontation, the way she always ran away from the hard questions. "I'm heading to bed," she said, barely making eye contact. "It's been a long day." I didn't argue. I just stood there, watching her leave. And that's when I realized I had no idea where this was going. I didn't know what had happened to us, or if we could ever fix it. But I was about to find out. And that was just the beginning. The night dragged on, but I couldn't escape the feeling that something had irrevocably shifted. I stayed in the living room long after everyone else had gone to bed. The silence was suffocating. Every corner of the house seemed to echo with the weight of unspoken words. I couldn't shake the image of Meredith, her back turned to me as she walked into the bedroom, closing the door quietly behind her. It was only when I was alone in the living room, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background, that I realized how far we had drifted apart. We hadn't fought. We hadn't even argued. But something had happened between us. She wasn't the same woman I married. And worse, neither was I. I kept replaying that moment in the kitchen. The look on her face when she spoke to Ethan. The way her eyes had lingered just a little too long on him. Like there was something unspoken between them that no one else could see. And when she said that line about not depending on anyone, was that a hint at something more? Or was I just grasping at straws? I knew I couldn't just ignore it. The ache in my chest wasn't going to go away. Not this time. I had always thought of myself as someone who could handle the lows of life, the quiet moments, the miscommunications. But now, for the first time, I felt truly helpless. At some point, I must have dozed off on the couch, because when I opened my eyes, the first light of morning was creeping in. I could hear the sound of Meredith moving around in the kitchen, the clink of dishes, the sound of coffee brewing. But as I walked into the kitchen, I didn't feel the usual warmth I used to. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. "Morning," she said, but it sounded forced, like a word she had said 1,000 times but no longer meant. "Morning," I muttered back, my voice feeling weak. There was a silence that settled between us. Neither of us spoke. I wanted to ask her what had happened last night, to demand some kind of explanation. But something held me back. Maybe it was the years of history, the memories that made it so hard to believe that something as simple as a glance could change everything. Or maybe it was fear. Fear that I might not like the answer. After a long pause, I couldn't keep quiet any longer. "Meredith," my voice broke slightly, but I pushed through. "What's going on? I don't understand. What happened last night?" She stiffened, not looking at me, her fingers frozen on the coffee cup. For a moment, I thought she wasn't going to say anything at all. But then she spoke, her words coming out in a rushed whisper. "I'm just tired, okay?" she said, her voice a little too sharp. "Everything feels like it's piling up, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what's going on with me. With us." The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I had prepared for an argument, for an admission of guilt, for something I could confront. But this felt like she was shutting me out. The words didn't sound like an apology or an explanation. They sounded like a declaration of defeat. "You're tired?" I repeated, not believing what I was hearing. "Is that all this is about? You just don't want to deal with it anymore?" Meredith finally looked at me, her eyes wide, but it wasn't a look of affection. It was distant, almost sad. "I don't know what I want anymore, okay?" she said, her voice quivering now. "I'm lost, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix us." The silence that followed was deafening. I wanted to reach out, to hold her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But I couldn't. Not when I felt like she was slipping away from me with every word she spoke. Instead, I just stood there, paralyzed by the weight of her confession. It wasn't just the uncertainty in her voice. It was the exhaustion in her eyes. She wasn't just tired of the relationship. She was tired of me. Tired of trying to make things work when she didn't know how. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about us, about her, fell apart. I had to leave. I had to step away before I said something I would regret, before I completely lost control. I turned around, walked out of the kitchen, and grabbed my coat. My heart was beating too fast, and my thoughts were clouded with anger, hurt, and confusion. I needed air. I needed space to think. I slammed the door behind me, the cold wind hitting my face as I stepped out into the street. The world felt blurry, out of focus. I tried to think of something, anything, that could bring clarity to the mess that was my life. But all I could think about was the way Meredith had looked at me just now, like I was a stranger. I walked for what felt like hours, the chill biting into my skin, but I didn't care. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't go back to that house, to that woman, who now felt so far away. It wasn't just the silence between us, it was the distance. The emotional chasm that had opened up without warning, swallowing everything in its path. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't even know where to begin. But I was about to find out. I walked for what felt like hours, letting my feet take me wherever my mind wasn't. The cold air bit at my skin, but I barely noticed. My thoughts were a storm, each one crashing against the next, louder than the pounding in my head. Meredith's words were still ringing in my ears. I'm lost, and I don't know how to fix it. I hadn't seen her like that before. There was a depth of despair in her voice that unsettled me. Was it just me? Had I failed her so completely that she felt like this? I didn't know what I expected to find, walking through the empty streets of our neighborhood, but I didn't care. I needed to clear my head. I needed to understand what was happening to my life, to my marriage. We'd been together for years. We'd built something, or so I thought. But now everything felt like it was falling apart before my eyes. By the time I made it to the park near our house, the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the empty paths. I sat down on one of the benches, the cold wood biting into my legs as I tried to steady my breath. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a moment, I thought about ignoring it. But something urged me to check. It was Meredith. Please come home. We need to talk. My stomach dropped. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep walking and pretend like nothing mattered anymore. But the other part of me, the part that had loved her for so long, the part that still wasn't ready to give up, knew I had to go back. I couldn't just run from this. I had to face it, whatever this was. I made my way back to the house slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. By the time I reached the front door, my heart was pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what to expect. Part of me thought she might be waiting for me, ready to tell me everything. The other part feared she'd be gone for good, leaving me to pick up the pieces of something that I wasn't sure was worth saving anymore. I opened the door cautiously, my mind still racing with questions. Meredith was sitting on the couch, her face pale, her eyes swollen from what I could only assume were tears. She didn't look up when I entered. The silence between us was suffocating, like a weight pressing down on both of us. Meredith, I said, my voice trembling. What happened to us? She finally looked up, and for a moment, it felt like time stood still. Her eyes were filled with sadness, but there was something else there too. Regret, maybe even guilt. I don't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know how we got here, how I got here. I stepped closer, but she held up a hand, stopping me. I've been pretending for so long. Pretending that everything was okay, that I was happy. But I'm not, and I'm not sure I ever was. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't understand. What was she saying? Was she telling me that this entire time, I had been blind to the truth? That everything I thought we had was a lie? I never wanted to hurt you, she continued, her voice shaking now. But I don't know how to keep pretending. I've been seeing someone else. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The room spun as if the floor had been yanked out from under me. I wanted to scream, to shout, to demand answers. But I couldn't find my voice. All I could do was stare at her, my mind struggling to process what she had just said. Who? I managed to choke out, my throat tight with disbelief. Who is it? Is it Ethan? Meredith's face twisted in pain, and she shook her head. No, it's not him. It's someone from work. Someone I met a few months ago. She paused, her eyes pleading for understanding. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to, but I couldn't stop it. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. My breath came in shallow gasps, my heart pounding in my ears. My mind couldn't catch up with the reality of the situation. Was this really happening? Was the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, telling me that she had been seeing someone else? That everything we had built was nothing? I wanted to yell at her, to call her every name I had been thinking, to tear into her for the betrayal. But instead, I stood there, frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. The weight of her confession pressed down on me, suffocating me with its reality. I'm so sorry, Meredith whispered, standing up and taking a step towards me. But I stepped back, my legs shaking with the force of my emotions. I couldn't move closer. I couldn't touch her. Sorry, I spat, the words bitter on my tongue. You're sorry? You're sorry that you've been lying to me for months? That you've been seeing someone else? How is that supposed to fix this, Meredith? She looked down, her face crumpling as if the weight of her own guilt was too much for her to bear. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know what to say anymore. I've ruined everything. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that she had ruined everything. But as I looked at her, so broken, so lost in her own mess, I realized something. She wasn't the only one who had ruined everything. I had been blind, too. Blind to the signs. Blind to the changes in her. Blind to the way our marriage had shifted without me even noticing. And now here we were, at the edge of something I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. I turned away, needing space to breathe, needing space to think. I couldn't process everything at once. But one thing was clear. I couldn't stay in this house. Not now. Not with this weight hanging between us. "Where are you going?" Meredith asked, her voice a mix of fear and confusion. "I don't know," I said, my voice hoarse. "But I can't stay here." With that, I grabbed my coat and walked out, not knowing where I was going, but knowing I couldn't stay. Not in that house. Not in that life. And as I stepped into the cold night air, I realized something else too. This wasn't just about her betrayal. This was about me. This was about what I had allowed to happen to myself, to my life, to my marriage. The streets felt foreign, even though I had walked them 1,000 times. I wandered without direction, the weight of Meredith's confession settling deep in my bones. I felt like I had been stripped bare, exposed in a way that left me feeling both numb and painfully aware of every tiny detail around me. The glow of streetlights seemed too bright, the sounds of the city too loud. And yet, there was a strange sense of calm in the chaos of it all. Maybe it was because I knew, deep down, that there was no going back. Whatever had been left between us, whatever we had tried to salvage, was gone now. And maybe, just maybe, it was for the best. But I couldn't shake the thought that kept repeating in my head. How did it get this far? How did I miss the signs? How did we both let it happen, drifting further and further apart without even realizing it? I found myself outside a bar, one that I'd passed countless times but had never gone into. It was small, quiet, almost hidden in the corner of the street. I wasn't in the mood for company. I wasn't in the mood for anything. But I needed something, anything, to take the edge off, to stop the constant churn of thoughts running through my head. So, without thinking, I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The atmosphere was dim, with soft jazz music playing in the background. A few people were scattered around, drinking quietly, lost in their own worlds. The bartender, an older man with a graying beard, looked up as I approached. He gave me a nod, recognizing the desperation in my eyes. I sat at the bar and ordered something strong, not bothering to make small talk. The first sip of whiskey burned my throat, a welcome distraction from the fire that was spreading through my chest. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth spread, trying to push everything else aside. But the images of Meredith's face kept returning. Her eyes, filled with guilt. The way she had looked at me as if I was some stranger she barely knew. And the words, "I've been seeing someone else." I didn't know how to make sense of any of it. I wanted to be angry, to shout and scream at her for what she'd done. But there was something else, something I wasn't ready to admit to myself. There was a part of me that understood why she had done it. Maybe not the who or the how, but the why. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being the man she needed. Somewhere along the way, I had lost her, and I hadn't even realized it. My mind was spiraling, caught in the whirlwind of betrayal and confusion, when the door to the bar opened, and a familiar face stepped inside. I froze. It was Ethan, the man who had been there, laughing with Meredith the night everything fell apart. The man who, despite not knowing it, had been the catalyst for everything. He saw me instantly, his face breaking into a knowing grin, as if nothing had changed. I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp, but I couldn't move. Part of me wanted to walk out, to avoid him, to avoid the confrontation that was inevitable. But another part of me wanted answers. I didn't care if I was ready for them or not. I had to know. Ethan made his way over to the bar, sliding onto the stool next to mine. His grin didn't falter, but there was something in his eyes, something almost smug. "Hey man," he said casually, as if everything was perfectly normal. "Long time no see." I couldn't speak for a moment, my throat tight. "What the hell are you doing here?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely more than a whisper. He chuckled, leaning back against the bar as if we were old friends. "Same thing you're doing. Trying to forget, I imagine." I swallowed hard, the anger rising in my chest like a tidal wave. "Forget what?" He tilted his head, looking at me with those piercing eyes. "Come on, you're not stupid. You know what I'm talking about." He paused, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "But if you need me to spell it out for you, I'm happy to." I could feel the heat in my face, my fists clenching involuntarily. "You really think you can just walk in here and act like nothing's happened?" I spat, like I don't know what's been going on behind my back. Ethan's smile faded slightly, but only for a moment. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he said, his voice almost too calm. But, things happen. People change. You changed. My heart pounded in my chest, and I suddenly felt lightheaded. I changed. I repeated, my voice growing louder with each word. I didn't change. I was here, wasn't I? I didn't go off and get involved with someone else. You changed. Both of you. You've been playing me this whole time, haven't you? Ethan didn't flinch, didn't back away. He just sat there, cool and collected, as if he'd seen this kind of reaction 100 times before. Look, I'm not here to fight you. But I'm not going to apologize for anything. Things were complicated. Meredith made her choice. She just didn't have the guts to tell you. The room seemed to spin as his words settled in. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, the alcohol in my system doing nothing to dull the sharpness of the truth. I had been played. Both of them had made their choices, and I had been too blind to see it. I stood up abruptly, the stool scraping against the floor. You're right. I'm not here for this. I tossed a few bills on the counter and turned to leave, but Ethan's voice stopped me. You're not going to just let it go, are you? He asked, his tone almost bored now. You're going to fight for her, right? For what? A marriage that's already dead? I didn't answer. I didn't have anything left to say. Instead, I walked out into the cold night air, the weight of Ethan's words sinking deep into my chest. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal or the fact that, deep down, I had already known. The night air was frigid as I walked down the street, my mind racing faster than my feet could move. Every step seemed to echo in my head, every part of me consumed by the conversation I had just had with Ethan. The words he had spoken, so casually, like he was giving me a lesson in how to face reality, stung in ways I couldn't even begin to explain. But there was something deeper, something that cut even harder. He was right. Meredith had made her choice. She had been living a life that I had never seen, with someone I had once considered nothing more than a distant colleague. And what hurt the most was the undeniable truth. I hadn't been paying attention. How long had this been going on? How long had I been so lost in my own world, so busy with my own excuses, that I had missed everything? The signs were there. No, they were glaring at me, but I had been too blind, too numb to notice. I stopped walking, unable to get any further. I stood there in the dark, in the middle of the street, my hands shoved deep in my pockets, staring at the faint streetlight ahead. What now? The question echoed in my mind over and over again. I didn't have an answer, not yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back to the house. Not now. Not after what I had just learned. The idea of confronting Meredith again, of looking into her eyes after everything that had happened, felt impossible. The anger, the pain, it was too much. I needed space. I needed to breathe, to get my thoughts in order, before I did something I'd regret. As I stood there, the cold creeping into my bones, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting it to be Meredith. But it wasn't. It was a message from Trevor, my best friend, the one person who had always been there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. You okay, man? I know things are crazy right now, but you don't have to go through this alone. I stared at the screen for a moment, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Should I tell him? Should I let him in on what was happening? He deserved to know the truth, but how could I explain it to him? How could I make him understand that the woman I loved, the woman I had trusted, had torn everything apart? I started typing a response, then paused. I couldn't find the words. The weight of it all was too much. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies, with no way to swim to the surface. After a few moments of hesitation, I put the phone back in my pocket and started walking again, this time without a destination. The city around me felt empty, the streets quieter now that the night had fully settled in. It was like I was walking through a dream, a nightmare, where I couldn't escape the image of Meredith's face, the pain in her eyes, the betrayal in her voice. I wandered aimlessly for what felt like hours. By the time I finally found myself standing outside a small diner, the first light of dawn was beginning to creep over the horizon. I hadn't realized how much time had passed, but the fatigue in my bones was starting to catch up with me. The weight of the night's events felt heavier, pulling me down like a lead anchor. I pushed open the door to the diner, the warm light spilling out into the early morning chill. It was nearly empty, save for a couple of old-timers sitting at the counter, sipping their coffee. I slid into a booth at the back, trying to push everything out of my mind, trying to create some space where I could think without feeling the suffocating pressure of everything closing in around me. The waitress, a young woman with tired eyes and a quick smile, came over and took my order without asking any questions. It was then, as I sat there staring out the window, that I realized just how much I had changed in the past few hours. The person I was sitting here now was not the person I had been last night, or even yesterday. I was someone different, someone who had been shattered by the very person he had once trusted most. I didn't know what to do, where to go, or how to even begin the process of picking up the pieces of my life. I didn't know if I could forgive Meredith. I didn't know if I even wanted to. But as I sat there, alone in that quiet diner, one thought kept nagging at me. Do I still love her? I couldn't answer. The truth felt like it was buried under layers of anger, betrayal, and hurt. But somewhere, deep inside, I knew that if there was any hope of saving what we had, I needed to find a way to forgive. Not for her, but for myself. Because if I didn't, I would be stuck in this never-ending cycle of pain, and I couldn't afford to let that happen. The coffee arrived in front of me, a steaming mug that seemed to offer a moment of comfort in the chaos. I took a sip, letting the warmth settle into my bones, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to breathe. But even as I tried to calm my racing thoughts, I knew that I wasn't done. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Whatever happened next, whatever Meredith had to say when I finally saw her again, I had to face it head on. I had to confront the truth. It was the only way forward. But for now, I would sit here. I would drink my coffee and wait for whatever came next. Because the next chapter of my life had just begun. The sun was just beginning to rise as I sat there in that diner, the mug of coffee warming my hands while my mind remained frozen in a haze of confusion. The light outside seemed almost mocking, too peaceful compared to the storm I was caught in. I kept thinking back to what Ethan had said, the casual way he dismissed my feelings, like I was just another guy caught up in a drama he wasn't supposed to be a part of. But more than that, I couldn't shake the way Meredith had looked at me, as if she wasn't sure anymore if she even wanted me. I kept replaying her words in my head. I've been seeing someone else. It wasn't just a confession. It was a declaration of everything I had failed to see. I had been so blind, so wrapped up in our routine that I had missed the signs, the coldness, the distance, the moments when she wasn't really there anymore, even when she was physically present. How had I allowed this to happen? How had I let her slip away without realizing it? The waitress came back, refilling my coffee, her eyes briefly meeting mine before she moved on. I gave her a tight smile, but it felt empty. I wasn't in the mood for small talk or pleasantries. I wanted answers. I wanted to know how I had gotten here and what the hell I was supposed to do next. I couldn't go back home. Not yet. Not when everything felt so raw. I had to do something, anything, to take my mind off it for a little while. So I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen, not sure who to call or where to go. I had lost track of time. I had no idea how long I had been sitting there in the quiet of the early morning hours. And then, out of nowhere, a message pinged. It was from Trevor. You still out there? We need to talk. Come by my place when you're ready. I sat there, staring at the message, feeling a mix of relief and dread. Trevor had always been my rock. He was the guy I could count on, no matter what. But even as I felt the pull to talk to him, to tell him everything that had happened, a part of me didn't want to burden him. I didn't want to be the guy who kept complaining, the guy who couldn't just move on. But as I stared at my phone, I realized that maybe I wasn't supposed to handle this alone. Maybe it was okay to ask for help. Maybe it was time to stop pretending that I had everything under control. I grabbed my jacket, slid some cash onto the table, and made my way out of the diner. The cool morning air hit me again as I stepped outside, and I found myself walking with purpose, heading toward Trevor's place. The city was coming alive, the streets beginning to fill with people, and yet I felt like I was still in the eye of my own personal storm, surrounded by chaos, but somehow untouched by it. As I walked, I found myself wondering if I had made a mistake. Was I just jumping into this whole mess, reacting without thinking? Was I overreacting? But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I knew something had broken between Meredith and me. I knew this wasn't a fight that we could just brush under the rug. She had stepped outside our marriage, and I had to confront it. I had to confront her, and most of all, I had to confront myself. By the time I reached Trevor's apartment, I was exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally. My head felt like it was full of static, like I couldn't hear anything clearly. Everything seemed muted, like I was walking underwater, trying to make sense of the world around me. But the door swung open before I even had a chance to knock, and there he was, Trevor, his usual calm demeanor a stark contrast to the turmoil that was raging inside me. He stepped aside, letting me in without a word, and I followed him into the small living room. Trevor was the type of guy who didn't need to fill the air with meaningless chatter. He just sat down on the couch and motioned for me to do the same. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to start, but then I blurted it out. "Meredith, she's seeing someone else." Trevor didn't flinch, didn't say anything at first. He just nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting this. I wasn't sure if that made me feel better or worse. "She told you that?" he asked, his voice low and steady. I nodded, sinking into the couch next to him, feeling the weight of my own body as if it didn't belong to me anymore. "Yeah, and I didn't even see it coming. I don't know how I didn't see it. I feel so stupid." Trevor sighed, leaning back in his chair, rubbing a hand across his face. "Man, you can't blame yourself. She's the one who made the choice. And it's clear she's been checked out for a while. You were just too close to it to see it." I swallowed hard, the words hitting me harder than I expected. He was right. She had checked out. The signs had been there, but I hadn't been willing to face them. I had convinced myself everything was fine, that the distance between us was just a phase, that we were just too busy with life. But life had a way of forcing you to see the truth when you weren't ready for it. And now I was left to pick up the pieces. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know if I was asking him or myself. Trevor didn't answer right away. He just sat there for a moment, watching me, as if he were searching for the right words. Finally, he spoke. "You have to decide what you want, man. You have to decide if you're going to fight for this or if it's time to let go. You can't keep holding on if she's already let go." The weight of his words settled heavily on my chest. I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go. I wasn't sure if I could. But I knew this. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. I couldn't keep pretending like Meredith and I were the same couple we used to be. And in that moment, as I sat in Trevor's living room, I realized something I hadn't been willing to admit to myself before. I was no longer the man I used to be. Something had shifted inside me, something that I couldn't ignore. Whether it was the betrayal or the realization that I had been living a lie, I didn't know. But I had to face it. I had to face what was coming next. I just didn't know what that was yet. But I would. Soon enough. The morning after I left Trevor's place, the air felt heavier, thicker, as if it was pressing down on me, making every movement feel laborious. I walked back to my apartment. The same streets that had once felt so familiar now seemed foreign. My head was spinning with everything that had happened, everything that had been said. The weight of the betrayal and the realization that I wasn't the man I used to be hung over me like a dark cloud, and I couldn't escape it. I had spent hours thinking about what Trevor said. What do I want? He was right. I had to make a choice. But making a decision about something as monumental as my marriage, it felt impossible. How could I choose between fighting for a woman who no longer seemed to care for me the way I thought she did, or walking away from everything we had built? The fear of the unknown gnawed at me. Would I regret giving up on her? Would I regret staying, knowing that she might never truly come back to me? I stood in front of the apartment building, staring up at the windows. My hands were shaking, the knots in my stomach tighter than ever. I didn't know what to expect when I walked through that door. Would she be waiting for me, ready to explain everything? Or had she already checked out emotionally, leaving me with nothing but a shattered version of what we once had? The thought of walking into that apartment, of facing the woman I once loved, terrified me more than anything. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door, stepping inside. The apartment was eerily quiet. The silence was suffocating. It wasn't the kind of silence that comforted you, that let you know everything was normal. It was the kind that made you realize how far things had fallen, how much had been left unsaid. I walked into the living room, my eyes scanning the space, looking for any sign of life. But there was nothing. Not a single sound. No sign that Meredith had been here at all. The space felt abandoned, as though she had already started to make her exit, mentally if not physically. I checked the bedroom, half expecting to find her packing or preparing to leave, but it was empty, save for the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. I sat down on the couch, my hands trembling as I rested my head in my hands. What had happened to us? How had we gone from a couple that could talk about everything to this? How had I missed the signs of her pulling away? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just angry with her. I was angry with myself. I had failed her in ways I hadn't even seen. The quiet stretched on, and I knew I couldn't keep hiding from the truth. I couldn't sit here, waiting for her to come back, or for the answers to fall into my lap. I had to face it. I had to confront her. But the question still loomed over me. What if it was too late? Just as I was about to give in to the crushing weight of uncertainty, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from Meredith. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I hesitated to open it. I didn't know what to expect. What could she possibly say to me now? We need to talk. I don't want to lose you, but I can't keep pretending anymore. I'm at the park, where we used to go. Please come. I stared at the message, my hands going cold. The park. The place we had gone so many times, where we'd sat together and talked about our dreams, our future. It felt like a lifetime ago. But there was something in her words, something in the desperation that had replaced the distance, that made me feel like there was still hope. I didn't waste another second. I grabbed my jacket and rushed out the door, the world outside moving too fast for my mind to keep up. My heart was pounding in my chest, and all I could think about was getting to her, hearing what she had to say, and maybe, just maybe, figuring out if we could find a way back to each other. The park was only a few blocks away, but it felt like an eternity before I reached it. When I got there, I saw her sitting on the bench where we used to sit, her head bent low, as if she was trying to hide from the world. I hesitated for a moment, watching her, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to approach her after everything. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and I saw her face. Pale, tired, but there was something else there. It wasn't just guilt. It was fear. Fear of what we had become. Fear of what I had become. Ryan, she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to fix it. I stood there, not sure if I was supposed to be angry or heartbroken. You're seeing someone else, I said, my voice raw. Why? Why didn't you tell me sooner? She looked down, not able to meet my gaze. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't want to lose you. But the more I tried to pretend, the more I realized I was losing myself. I've been so caught up in trying to hold on to something that was already gone that I forgot to take care of the person who mattered most. You mattered to me, Ryan, but I wasn't being honest with you. I haven't been honest with myself. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could hear the truth in her voice, but it didn't make the pain any easier to bear. I stepped closer, my heart torn between the man I used to be and the man I had become. So what now? What do we do? She wiped a tear from her cheek, her eyes filled with regret. I don't know, she whispered, but I want to try. I know I can't undo what's been done, but I don't want to walk away from us without trying everything. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I could trust her again, if I could trust myself. But in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about us, about what we still had left. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be perfect, but maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to rebuild. I didn't have all the answers, but as I sat down next to her, feeling the weight of everything we had gone through, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of our story. Not yet, but it was the beginning of something new. The air around us was still, but it didn't feel suffocating anymore. For the first time in what felt like ages, there was a quiet understanding between Meredith and me, a silent recognition that we were both broken, but we were still here, together, trying to figure out what came next. I didn't know how we were going to rebuild what had been torn apart, or if we could. I didn't have all the answers, and neither did she. But there was something different in the way we looked at each other now, something fragile yet real. Meredith wiped another tear from her cheek and took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Ryan. I should have been honest with you. I let everything get so out of hand, but I don't want to lose you. I can't imagine my life without you in it. I looked at her, seeing the woman I had once known so well. There was a rawness in her eyes, but there was also hope, a spark of something that had been buried under the weight of mistakes and misunderstandings. And in that moment, I realized that I still loved her. Maybe not in the way I once did, but in a way that was deeper now, born from the pain we had gone through and the way we were finally starting to be honest with each other. I don't want to lose you either, I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. We've been through a lot, but maybe that's what we need. To face the truth, even if it hurts. She nodded, her lips trembling slightly, as if trying to find the right words. I think we need to take it one step at a time. I don't want you to think that everything is going to be fixed overnight. But I want to try, Ryan. I want to try with you. A sense of relief washed over me as I sat there next to her. The weight I had been carrying lifting just a little. I didn't have a clear path ahead, but I had something better. I had her willingness to try, and I had my own resolve to not give up. Maybe we had both failed each other in the past, but that didn't mean we couldn't start again. We sat there for a while, not speaking, just letting the stillness settle between us. For the first time in what felt like ages, I didn't feel alone in the world. I was with her. She was with me. And that meant something. Eventually, she reached out, her hand finding mine, the touch warm and familiar. I squeezed it gently, not sure where this journey would take us, but knowing that, for now, we were still walking it together. Let's go home, I said, my voice soft but firm. Meredith smiled through her tears, a genuine, heartfelt smile that made my heart swell. Yeah, she whispered. Let's go home. As we walked away from the park, side by side, the world around us seemed a little less dark. There was still work to be done. We weren't going to get through this overnight, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope. And that was enough. We didn't have all the answers, and the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. But we were ready to face it together. And that was a start. It was a new beginning for both of us, one step at a time. And as long as we took those steps together, I knew we had a chance. Maybe not to fix everything, but to rebuild what we could, stronger and more honest than ever before. And that's what mattered.